I want you to picture something. It's March 1944. You're in a big, imposing office in Berlin, right in the heart of a world at war. And on your desk, there's a folder. Just one folder. It's stamped secret for the minister only. And you are the minister. Albert Speer. They call you a miracle worker, the man who keeps the Nazi war machine running against all odds. So you open it. And in that one moment, everything changes. You realize, with chilling certainty, that the war is already over, and you've lost. So what was in that folder? It wasn't battle plans. It wasn't some new superweapon. It was something way more powerful. A blueprint of defeat, written in the cold, hard language of numbers.
And that right there, that was Speer's first thought. I mean, can you blame him? He's looking at these numbers, and they're so huge, so completely off the charts that his brain just can't process it. The only thing that makes sense is that someone, somewhere, made a typo, a misplaced decimal point. That's all it could be, right? But then more reports came in, and more. And slowly, this horrifying realization starts to sink in. There is no mistake. The numbers are real. And they're painting a picture of an enemy so powerful, so industrially massive, that Germany hadn't even begun to understand what it was up against.
All right, so the miracle worker. To really get why this was such a shock, you have to understand who Albert Speer was. This guy wasn't just some bureaucrat. He was Hitler's genius of organization. When he took over in 1942, the German war economy was a complete mess, inefficient, chaotic, but Speer, through sheer willpower and organizational brilliance, he wrangled it, he streamlined it, he turned it into a powerhouse. The propaganda minister Goebbels said Speer made the impossible possible, and for a while, it really looked like he had.
300%. Just let that number sink in. That's the increase in German war production under Speer. And get this, he did it while Allied bombers were pounding German cities into rubble day and night. While the bombs were falling, Speer's factories were pumping out more tanks, more ammo, more planes than ever before. Ammunition production went up by 5 times. Tank production quadrupled. He had every single reason to be confident, to believe that German engineering and sheer grit could overcome anything.
So how'd he pull it off? Well, it wasn't magic. It was just smart, modern management. He took a chaotic system and made it rational. He streamlined everything. So instead of one master craftsman building an entire airplane wing, he had a line of workers each doing one simple, specialized task over and over. He forced different companies to use the same standardized parts. And he took a look at the insane number of aircraft models, 42, and slashed it down to just 5. He was basically bringing American-style mass production to the German war machine. And the irony of that, well, it's pretty thick.
So all that confidence, all that German pride in their industrial miracle, it all came to a dead stop in March of 1944. That's when the folder landed on his desk. This wasn't just one report. It was a massive intelligence summary pulled from everywhere, from spies, from decoded messages, from neutral diplomats, from reconnaissance photos, and all of it, every single piece, pointed to one simple, devastating truth. Okay, look at this chart. This is it. This is the moment the world turned upside down for Speer. He had just gone to Hitler and proudly laid out this monumental goal for 1944. Germany was going to produce almost 40,000 aircraft, an incredible feat. But the folder showed that the United States, alone, not even counting the British or the Soviets, had actually built 96,000 planes. It wasn't even a race, it was a joke. Germany's absolute, all-out, miracle-level best was less than half of what just one of their enemies was doing. This had to be the question screaming in his head. How? Just how? Remember, German propaganda had for years painted America as this soft, decadent, chaotic country full of jazz music and movie stars, not a serious military power. So how could that country be outproducing the disciplined, militarized, efficient German state on a scale that was just unimaginable? The answer, as Speer was starting to realize, was that they were playing 2 completely different games.
And let's be clear, this wasn't just one piece of intel. It was an avalanche. The evidence was pouring in from every direction. You had reconnaissance photos. You had decoded American shipping manifests meant for the Russian allies. You had reports from Japanese diplomats, from Swiss businessmen, from Spanish officials. And every single source told the exact same impossible story. The numbers weren't wrong. If anything, they were probably too low.
To really get our heads around this, we have to zoom in, to focus on one single place that became a symbol of this American might, a factory called Willow Run in Michigan. It was built by Ford,
And this one building, this one factory, was physically larger than Germany's entire Messerschmitt Aircraft Company complex. It was everything German industry wasn't. Just let that quote sink in. One massive B-24 Liberator bomber, a heavy four-engine beast, rolling off the assembly line every 63 minutes, like clockwork. That's not the output of a whole country, that's one factory. The report came from a Swedish engineer who'd been given a tour, and his notes were so detailed they gave the Germans a crystal clear and absolutely terrifying look at what happens when you apply the logic of car manufacturing to the business of building bombers.
And these numbers right here tell you the whole story. This is the how. To build their main fighter, the Bf-109, it took German craftsmen 4,000 hours of work. Now look at the American B-24. A plane 5 times heavier, a heavy bomber. It took less than a third of the man-hours. Why? Because the Germans were building aircraft like master craftsmen. The Americans were manufacturing them like refrigerators.
Now this is wild. It shows you the massive cultural gap between the two countries. In Germany, how many tanks you built was a state secret, on par with the atomic bomb. Factory workers literally had to sign oaths that they would be executed if they talked. In America, they printed the numbers in Life magazine. They shouted them from the rooftops to sell war bonds. It wasn't arrogance, it was a strategy. Their industrial power was so overwhelming, the truth itself became a weapon of war.
And this massive gap wasn't just in manufacturing, it was in the very lifeblood of a modern army, oil. The US was pumping out almost 5 million barrels of oil every single day. Germany, which had to create most of its fuel synthetically from coal, was managing a tiny fraction of that. Here's a crazy stat for you. The American military was burning more fuel on training flights for new pilots than the entire German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was using in actual combat. It was a chasm they could never, ever cross.
Okay, so what happens when you present this mountain of undeniable, catastrophic evidence to the leaders of the Third Reich? Well, this is where the story stops being about numbers and starts being about beliefs. It's a collision between the cold, hard facts in Speer's folder and the fanatical ideology that had taken over an entire country.
When Speer showed this all to Hitler, even with photographs to back it up, Hitler's reaction was instant. Total denial. He just yelled, "Propaganda!" He called it lies spread by the enemy. He simply refused to believe it. And you have to understand, this wasn't just him being stubborn. His entire worldview was built on the idea that willpower, belief, and racial superiority could overcome any material disadvantage. These numbers weren't just an intelligence report, they were a direct attack on the very foundation of his power.
And this slide really gets to the heart of the whole thing. Germany treated its weapons like works of art. A Tiger tank was a masterpiece of engineering built by skilled artisans. An American Sherman tank was an industrial product. The goal wasn't perfection, it was volume. They designed things to be simple so they could be churned out by the thousands by a workforce of people, many of them women, who just a few months earlier had never even seen the inside of a factory.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to the Germans themselves. Dr. Ernst Heinkel, one of their most brilliant aircraft designers, he absolutely nailed it with this quote. He saw it plain as day. They were artisans, the Americans were industrialists. And in a long, brutal, grinding war of attrition, the artist is always going to lose to the assembly line. You just can't argue with the math.
Which brings us to the final, unavoidable conclusion. By the time Albert Speer opened that folder in March of 1944, the war was already decided. The outcome was locked in. It wasn't a question of if Germany would lose, but simply when. The final chapter had already been written, not on the battlefields of Russia or France, but on the factory floors of Detroit and Seattle. The fighting, the killing, all the horror, it would go on for another year, but the result was already there, in black and white in the production ledgers.
And this industrial gap had a direct and terrifying human cost. It wasn't just about steel and aluminum, it was about people. American pilots were going into combat with hundreds of hours of flight experience. They were professionals. By 1944, because of the fuel shortages, German pilots were being thrown into battle with just over 100 hours. By 1945, it was down to 50 hours. 50! They were barely out of flight school. As one German general said after the war, we were sending children up to fight professionals. It wasn't combat, it was murder.
The final numbers on the scorecard are just mind-blowing. No matter how you slice it, it's the same story. More than 3 times as many planes, 7.5 times as many trucks, and modern armies live and die by their supply trucks. Even with tanks, where Germany had its reputation for quality, the US still made more. And again, you have to remember, this is just the United States. This isn't even counting all the gear being pumped out by the rest of the Allies.
Ultimately, what this whole story teaches us is that the most powerful weapon of World War II wasn't the Tiger tank or the B-17 bomber. It was this: industrial capacity. It's a nation's ability to make things, sure, but it's also the ability to take a massive hit, lose tons of equipment, and just make more. To put it another way, America could have lost Germany's entire annual output of tanks in a single bad month, and still had more coming down the line. It's the ability to sustain a war effort that ultimately wins.
And this is the fundamental lesson. It's what Albert Speer finally understood sitting in his office that day. Yes, the courage of soldiers matters. Of course it does. And the genius of generals is important. But in a modern, total war, victory is forged right here. It's won by the welders, the engineers, the assembly line workers, the logisticians, all the people who create a tidal wave of material so huge that no amount of battlefield heroism can stand against it.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. The story of that secret folder is a powerful reminder that no matter how strong your beliefs are, no matter how much you want something to be true, eventually you slam into reality. And it forces us to ask this really big question, one that echoes through all of history. In a major conflict, can sheer willpower ever really win against cold, hard mathematics? The answer, as Speer discovered, was already on his desk. And it was a clear, brutal, and devastating no.